Or finish our cattle that we use in our retail store here at the farm. That's one thing that makes cattle production work on the East Coast, is the availability of high quality byproducts. These bulls have all been selected for high marbling and yield grade as well. This is our corn silage trench here. We do feed corn silage on a regular basis. We buy the corn silage from a local producer that then brings it and delivers it to us and packs it, then helps us cover it.
Okay, it's very good. So, and what's the diet of the cows? Is corn silage and what?
Corn silage and our fruit byproduct. So
Okay.
This is pretty unique for our operation. So this is a fruit byproduct that we get from the Del Monte plant here in Maryland, and mix it with our rations. It's equivalent to corn silage with a little more protein. It's a lot wetter. It runs probably about 20% dry matter, so there's a lot of moisture that goes with it. But it's cheap. It costs us about $50 a ton on a dry matter basis, and that's the cheapest feed that we have to work with. That's one thing that makes cattle production work on the East Coast, is the availability of high quality byproducts. This would be a fruit product. There's similar vegetable products, and then even bread products like bagels, old bread are used. Romaine noodles, waste from the Kellogg cereal plant are all used in local feedlots to help cheapen the ration cost. Well, right now there's 2 people that work full-time on the farm taking care of the cattle. That does not include me. And then we get some part-time people. Right now we have an intern from the University of Maryland that helps us out. And then a couple high school kids that come in and help out occasionally. But it's just 2 full-time people on the farm. It's really oriented towards 4 full-time people. So we're short on labor right now, trying to find some other people to hire. So this is where we feed or finish our cattle that we use in our retail store here at the farm. It's a complete mixed diet that includes the vegetable mix that we looked at. It has hay in it now. We haven't opened up our corn silage pit, but later on we'll replace the hay with corn silage, and obviously it's a high energy diet, so you'll see lots of corn in it. And these cattle, this is the pen that we're actually picking finished cattle out of right now for our farm store.
So why you choose this breed?
Angus?
Yeah.
Well, we chose Angus because they're inherently higher quality beef than a lot of the other breeds, and plus it's a large breed in the United States and has a big database with lots of genetic information, or EPDs, that help us select the best cattle for what we're trying to do.
Okay, and it's easy to buy or not?
It is.
Yeah,
you can buy semen, you can buy embryos. There's Angus sales. There's probably 5 or 6 Angus sales every day that you can go to somewhere in the country and buy cattle. The weather here, I would say, is moderate. We do have winter. It'll get down. The coldest it usually gets is maybe 0 for a day or 2. Most of the time it gets above freezing every day in the winter. Summertime we'll get 90s to 100 degree days, sometimes for a week at a time, but generally it's 90. It's about as high as it'll get. So it's moderate, but we do have extremes where the cattle have to be able to adapt to heat. And of course our heat here, because of our location of the Chesapeake Bay, it's a high humidity heat. And so our cattle are adapted to heat and humidity, and then they also have to be able to tolerate colder weather as well. We calve in January and February, and we do have a big stone barn that we use for that. And we put some gates in there, but that's mostly for convenience. We wouldn't have to calve inside, but we have this big barn, and so we use it for that. Just for convenience. We got cameras set up, and it just makes it easier to check the cows. We typically don't have any calving issues, but we have them up close just in case. So this is our cattle handling facility. This is where we do everything to the cattle, from vaccinations to collect weaning weights on our scale. Then we do embryo transfer, artificial insemination, preg checks. As I said, anything that involves doing something to a cow, it's done in here. Our farm is laid out very efficiently to where one person on a 4-wheeler can bring any animal from any place of the farm through a series of gates and alleyways and put it right in our head gate to do whatever they need to do with it. A full-time veterinarian or anything. We have a veterinarian on call, but primarily what she does is our semen testing on the bulls, preg checking, just general herd health. with the herd. She does come out for emergencies, but very rarely do we have that. We can pretty much handle everything that happens by ourselves here. Mortality rate would be highest probably on our newborn calves, and that's probably in the 3 to 5% range within birth through the first week or so. Some years it's 0, some years it might be 6 or 8%, but on average it's 3 to 5%. And then the death rate on the rest of the animals, it's less than 1%. Yeah.
And the mortality rate is higher in the winter or summer? Do you have that in mind?
It would be higher in the winter, primarily because we have more mud in the wintertime, and it's harder for cattle to get around the mud and creates more stress, and then wet, cold weather creates stress, particularly on young calves. So those cows that are calving in February and March, if those calves go out and then we have a cold, rainy spell or ice storm or something that comes through, and there's some of those young calves that get stressed, then they would be the ones that would be most susceptible to having some kind of a death loss. But we try to stay on top of that and get them moved in to where they're protected from the elements to give them a chance to recover. So these are bulls that belong to our lease program. These are bulls that we'll lease out to other producers to use for 2 to 3 months. Then we bring them back, retest them. We do a semen test or breeding soundness exam on them twice a year, so before each breeding season. We do use them for spring breeding and fall breeding, and then bring them back here each time they get revaccinated and retested before they go out. Our selection program, because these are going out to commercial producers, a lot of our producers are part-time farmers. They don't have time to spend full-time with their cattle, and so they've got kind of some different requirements over what a full-time rancher might have. So the first thing they always ask me is calving ease. They want bulls or sire calves that are born easy and are vigorous after birth. So that's the first thing they want is calving ease, because they can't spend time with their cattle during calving. And then we buy them by the pound from these producers. They want calves that are going to grow fast, wean off heavy, so they get a nice check from us when we buy the calves from them at weaning. And then of course we have the calves, we put them in our feedlot cooperator herds, and we want them to grow fast post-weaning for us, so they perform well in the feedlots. And then of course we are looking for carcass quality, so these bulls have all been selected for high marbling and yield grade as well. Lately we've been able to even do some genetic testing for tenderness, which is obviously important to us from an eating quality standpoint. So our cattle are selected for calving ease, growth, marbling, and then the next thing is that our producers are selecting replacement heifers from these calves. They got to have maternal traits to produce good replacement quality females. So it's not just a program based on carcass quality, it's all-around program for the full production system from start to finish.
What you did?
I just got a sample of our ration that was fed today.
Okay, and you sent to the lab?
No.
Make some analysis?
Oh, we do some of that. But actually, this is for a class tomorrow at the University of Maryland.
Okay.
They're having a nutrition class, and they're collecting samples of rations. And so I told them I would get a sample this morning while it was fresh,
Okay,
rather than tonight when they wanted to come to get it. So, because the problem with our ration with that fruit in it is the first thing the cattle do is pick the fruit out of it. They like that the best. And so the ration in the bunk changes over the course of the day based on what they've eaten. That's not ideal, but with our fruit, it's just a fact that we have to face up to, that there's big chunks of fruit in there that they can sort out and eat.
Okay, good.
But what we have here in this pen is some young bulls. They'll be a year old this fall, and these will be bulls that we'll select our replacement breeding bulls from. Again, based on calving ease, growth, carcass, and then maternal. The ones that don't make it will be castrated and then used in our feeding program for our retail store. And the balance of them will be used for our cooperator herd program and either sold or leased. We do sell bulls here. The top end of our bulls tend to go to other purebred breeders, and then the middle to lower end will go then to commercial herds, mostly to produce calves for us. This is another group of young bulls. We actually have a herd in Virginia as well, and these would be the bull calves from our Virginia herd. In terms of implants in the cattle that we feed, we don't use implants, and it's not because of anything outside the fact that it has a small impact on tenderness. When you look at the research data, when implants were developed, they followed it through with carcass data and measured the tenderness, and it did have a small effect. It's probably not an effect that you could taste, but it is an effect that you can measure. And so we just opted not to do the implants, the hormonal implants, because of the effect it has on carcass quality. Since 1996, when we made that decision, it's become popular to do never ever and don't use implants. Implants are safe. Scientifically, there's no bad effects from hormones. Hormonal implants is such a small amount that it doesn't really affect the amount in beef. For a long time, you couldn't even measure the differences. Now they've got instruments that are sensitive enough they can pick up the differences between animals that are implanted with hormones and those that are not. However, intact heifers have a higher level of hormones than what even implanted steers do, and if you feed intact males, that just blows the implanted meat right out of the water as far as the amount of hormones in the beef. So it's mostly a marketing thing as far as not having implants, more so than what it is a safety or a practical thing. But it does add, an implant in the United States costs $1 or $2, and from that implant you'll get an additional 20 to 40 pounds of beef, depending on what research you look at, and for no extra feed. So it's very economical, or there's a big economic benefit to the producers that do use the implants that don't have a market for specialized beef. So this is a bull we call Matt Dillon. He's one of the top bulls we've produced here. Because we focus our genetics for close to 28 years for calving ease, growth, marbling, maternal, in our environment, what we're starting to find here in the last 5 years or so is that the best bulls that we can select and use out of the Angus breed are actually our own bulls. And so it started back several years ago with the bull we called Powerball. We do genomic testing on all our cattle, and we've got the genomic test back on him. He came out in the Angus breed as the bull that had the best combination of calving ease, growth, and marbling at the time. And so we used him quite a bit. We shipped semen around the country and some international semen from him. And then we got some good daughters that we had, and this bull Matt Dillon is actually out of a daughter of Powerball. There's another bull that we used quite heavily and sold to Accelerated Genetics. His name is Roseda Plant, and that semen is actually available in Brazil if you would like to use some of that. And then she's kind of far back there, but the cow that's here is K796. She's one of our top donor cows. We do quite a bit of embryo transfer. Most of what we do now is with in vitro fertilization, and so we're starting to get calves out of her. And she would have her first natural calf this year, but because of in vitro, we're able to get more calves out of her early on, and we do, like I say, a fair amount of that. We used to do traditional embryo transfer, but the value of in vitro fertilization is that we're able to use younger females and get a step on the generation interval by doing that. So most of our breeding here is artificial insemination and implanting embryos, and then we do follow up with cleanup bulls in the pasture. And actually Matt Dillon, since he's on site, is our natural cleanup bull, so it's nice having one of our top bulls that we can use for natural service as well. The mango pits are the only thing they won't eat out of that vegetable pile. They'll eat the mango and then spit out the pit. And you'll find them all over the farm. I think sometimes they do swallow the pit, but then when they ruminate, you'll see them bring up their cud and start chewing, and they'll start chewing real funny and then spit out a pit and then go ahead and finish up their cud and swallow it again. I've only seen that once, so I don't know how often it happens, but I have caught one doing that one time. The rest of the time you see it at the bunk, they'll be eating one at the bunk and then they'll spit it out. So this set of bull calves here, we mentioned in vitro fertilization. One thing we do is we'll take embryos and ship them to some of our cooperator herds, and they'll implant those embryos into their commercial cows, and then they'll raise those calves to weaning, and we buy them back as weaned calves. That just helps us to leverage our genetics and produce more calves, and particularly more bulls, than what we could produce on site here for our bull sale and lease program. So these were spring-born calves that were weaned probably 3 weeks ago, and they'll go out next spring as breeding bulls to some of our small herds. The lot back behind you guys are the heifer mates to them, so we get heifers and bulls from them. So with the cows on the hill here, it'd probably be a good time to talk about our pasture program. We've got about 250 acres of pasture on this farm, and about another 100 acres down the road where the owner lives. And then we lease probably another 150 to 200 acres of pasture, particularly for summer grazing and haymaking. We're able to produce all the hay that we need. We do buy corn silage from local producers. We buy our corn from local producers, but we do produce all the hay that we need. As far as the pastures, it's mostly cool season type, not mostly, it is cool season pastures, primarily tall fescue. Does the best in this environment with cattle pressure. We can use orchard grass on particularly some of our hay fields. That works quite well. We use legumes in our pasture. We've got a good stand of ladino or white clover in all of our pastures. We overseed every 2 to 3 years with red clover to add red clover to the pasture mix as well. And then in our wintering areas, we'll overseed with an annual ryegrass in the spring after we pull the cows off to get an annual crop of ryegrass that we can utilize until the next winter season, to where it becomes a sacrifice lot for hay feeding. We do rotational grazing. We try to move the cattle every 3 to 4 days or twice a week. We feel like that increases our pasture production or carrying capacity by about an additional 50%, just for the effort of moving cows from lot to lot. And we do use temporary electrified poly wire to set up temporary lots to do that with, as well as some permanent divisions to work with as well. These are our fall calving cows. In the fall we do calve outside. It's temperate enough that we don't have to do too much with them as far as worried about chilled calves. We do check them every 4 to 6 hours. I use a spotlight to come out and check them at night. But as I've emphasized earlier, we breed for calving needs, so very rarely do we have to deal with any calving issues, spring or fall, either one. So this is where we get our corn. Our corn is delivered from local producers into the big bin, and then it goes through a roller mill into the small bin, and then from there into our TMR mix wagon that delivers it to the feed bunks.
Okay. Do you not use corn flake here?
No.
No? Okay.
No, you're talking about steam flake corn?
Okay.
Yeah, we're not big enough to justify the investment to do that. We dry roll it and feed it whole. When you look at the research data on corn, steam flake processing is really the only one that adds anything nutritionally to the corn. The rest of it might affect maybe digestibility and flow and that kind of thing, but it's particularly from a beef cattle standpoint, whole corn or dry rolled is pretty effective. Sometimes fine ground corn can actually cause problems, digestive issues with the cattle. Kind of pre-process the hay. Our TMR mix wagon can process whole bales at a time, and so we'll pre-process those and pile them here to where we can mix them on a batch by batch basis without having to wait on the bales when we're feeding. And then back here we have our dried distiller's grain, which is also a byproduct of the ethanol industry. The ethanol industry is so big that it's pretty much a commodity. We can actually call up different commodity brokers and get bids on it, and then have a semi-load delivered based on the low price of the bid.
They feed once a day in the morning. And how is the normal, like the daily operation? Like you feed the cows in the morning, and then what else you have through all the days, like normally in a basic day, like?
Well, for the crew, I mean, they'll start out feeding, and it's the young cattle, the feedlot cattle, and the young cattle that get fed first, and then the rest of the day they'll spend putting out hay for the mature cows, taking fruit out to the mature cows, and then cleaning up various concrete feed pads, clipping pastures. Generally when we move cattle from pasture to pasture, we'll go in and clip or bush hog behind the cows to mow down anything they didn't eat, because usually it's just weeds, to help keep our weeds under control. Because we do use legumes and grasses in our pastures, we can't use any chemicals, because chemicals all tend to kill one or the other, and so our weed control is mechanical or mowing to keep the weeds down, and that seems to work pretty well. If you mow what the cows don't eat, generally those weeds can't handle regular mowing.
When you start using that product, the food waste product, when you started using
We've been using some kind of a food waste product for quite a while. We went through a stage where we used a lot of brewer's grain, which would be a barley product from some of the local breweries. And then as that got too expensive because we couldn't compete with the dairy farmers to buy it, then we moved on to a vegetable product, which came actually from the same company as this fruit product, but it was more lettuce, cabbage, peppers, and then some different kind of fruits like apple waste, and that's a product that had some citrus in it as well. This fruit product here seems to be more watermelons, cantaloupes, mangoes, and there's other fruits that'll show up in it. Lots of pineapples. So that's the fruit waste that we feed. But we've always tried to find economical source of byproducts to feed, and we're big enough that we can take truckloads of it, so they kind of seek us out as well to bring products to us.
And how much do you pay for each feed, for example, for corn silage, for everything? Do you know the prices?
I do. This year we bought our corn silage for $50 a ton, delivered and packed in our pit. So on a dry matter basis, that makes it $150 a ton on a dry basis. Our fruit, we're paying $10 a ton on that delivered and as fed. And as I mentioned earlier, it's about 20% dry matter, and so that works out to $50 a ton on a dry basis. So our fruit is about a third the cost of our corn silage. The corn, right now we're paying like $4.50 a bushel for it, and I can't do the math in my head to figure out what that is per ton, but it's, as far as the energy source, I mean, it's a fairly economical energy source now. When it was $8 a ton, it wasn't, but at $4.50 a ton, it's doable. Then the hay, we raise our own hay, so that's hard to figure. I think if we had to buy the hay, it would be somewhere around $150 a ton for the quality of hay that we feed.
How many diets they mix?
Just two. We've got
Just two.
the finishing diet and then the growing diet.
Okay.
Now they will put just fruit in it and take out to some of the cows.
Oh, okay.
Because the older cattle can get by with just the fruit product by itself. We've got a load of fruit coming through here. Yeah, we get a load a day, 6 loads a week. So there's one day, I think it's Sunday, they don't bring a load.
Have you thought to push that feed waste that is there already and then put on top after, or this is going to be a lot of feed?
No,
or extra?
they'll dump it beside,
Oh, okay.
and then we'll finish up that load and then start this, and then tomorrow they'll dump on this
Oh,
side.
okay.
So it's side to side. Sometimes we don't get it cleaned out every day completely, but by sometime in the week we get it cleaned out. And
Okay.
so you can see how wet it is. And one of the problems feeding it is that the dry matter of it actually changes every day because of what drains off overnight. If you feed it today right after it's dumped versus what you feed tomorrow after
It's going to be very wet today compared to tomorrow.
yeah, it'll be a little drier tomorrow, and then if it
Yeah.
sets for another day, it'll be even drier the next day. And
Yeah, that's the point.
we'll just shoot for a happy average.